Welcome to the Birth Launch Podcast, an empowering space for expecting and new parents to hear candid conversations with experts and learn how to craft your ideal birth. We will tackle the scary and weird questions that come up along the way and provide answers that are driven by science and evidence-based recommendations. I'm going to show you how to redefine parenthood and choose what's best aligned for you and your goals. With 10 years of experience in family education and a master's degree in human development and family studies, I'm ready to help you navigate pregnancy and explore your birth options to free yourself of fear surrounding childbirth. My goal is to help you have an informed and confident labor experience, plus an empowered and joyous postpartum. Alexis, welcome to the show.
Hi, HeHe. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you. So, you guys, today we're going to be doing kind of a case study. Alexis, obviously, as I told you, edits our podcast, and she came to me and said, I have a story that people might be able to learn from. And I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, I want you to share your story. And we can really break it down so that people listening can see how someone might go down that classic cascade of interventions that leads to a C-section, but then how you can also come out on the other side VBACing. And we have obviously spent this last month talking about avoiding unnecessary C-sections and how do you tip the scales in your favor to have a vaginal delivery and how do you really set yourself up preparing for a VBAC. So Alexis, welcome. And also thank you so much for being so open with our audience and kind of sharing your birth story really transparently and also letting me share my opinions and my thoughts around it, because I know that's kind of tough too to hear feedback from your birth stories.
Yes, absolutely. It's really exciting. I've dissected both stories thoroughly in my processing. So I'm happy to share all that here.
Nice. I love it. Okay. I kind of want to start there. How much processing did all of your birth stories take? Because I imagine someone who's willing to share their birth story and also, like I say, get feedback from, we didn't know each other then. And, I know nothing about your birth stories. You're about to get some really honest, like raw feedback from me. And I just have to compliment how much healing must have been involved in that to be able to put yourself out like that. So I'm super curious what that looked like and kind of what steps you took to get to this place where you can talk about your birth stories and say, yeah, I think people have something to learn. And I want to share that.
Okay, so that is a very big question. As you know, we met online, you and I
Yeah.
did, because I had started my business to help moms heal after a difficult birth. And so that's something I do part time. That is because it took literally years to process.
Mm.
After I had my son, I did not know the words birth trauma. I had no
Wow.
idea that that was like a thing, right? Trauma was for veterans. So the flashbacks that I was having, I had no word for that, right? And so it wasn't until my husband and I decided we weren't having any more children. My son was a handful. And we were like, we went to these midwives in town to talk about, first off, if it was safe for me to have another pregnancy and birth, because there were some complications, which we'll dive into. But my previous OB had mentioned, if you can even have another child, we'll just jump straight to a cesarean.
Oh my God.
So, yeah. So when we went and talked to those midwives, like years later, because of course, then with the trauma, I had neglected medical care. And so it had taken a couple of years to get back to any kind of medical provider. So when my husband and I went to talk to these midwives, we got this whole packet full of information about VBAC and all of the risks and all of this stuff. So I dove into that rabbit hole. I found some resources on iykyk. The iykyk Facebook page for my city was super useful and helpful in that. But as we looked at all of that information, I remember just bawling my eyes out. I'm sitting there in bed, reading about VBAC, reading through this folder. And, we sat with that decision. Oh, we probably went to the doctor in summer. It was probably around January or February that we decided we were sure we weren't going to have any more children. Well, sometimes the universe has other plans because a month later, apparently we did not understand how to use the contraceptives appropriately because lo and behold, we were pregnant. And so that is when I realized how bad my first birth had been. And not to call any birth bad, because I don't necessarily believe in using the words bad or good about people, about births, about anything. But once I became pregnant with my daughter, I was devastated. I was terrified. I was pretty depressed. And I realized, oh crap, I have to do some healing because this baby's coming out one way or another. So it was at that point that I actually started healing. And so from there, I mean, there are a million things, right? So one of the steps that I had taken towards healing, even before I was pregnant, which I didn't realize it wasn't necessarily intentional healing, was doing research about what had happened in my son's birth, in my first cesarean. There was that research component. And that is a lot of times the stage of healing where people are making sense of what happened, which is an important stage in healing. And then once I was pregnant, I did see a lot of people. So there was support from a doula. There was support from a woman who was actually studying to be a home birth midwife. And she had been my diastasis coach after Augie. And so she had played a part in my physical healing. But then at this stage, just about 4 years later, she was becoming a home birth midwife. And so some of the things that she said had been really healing in my preparation to birth again and in my processing that I was pregnant again because of her view on birth, right? And then I had been vegan when I got pregnant for the second time. And so I had all these cravings for fried chicken. And so I met with this life coach because she was a vegan and I was like, I need help. I'm hating myself for eating like this. And can you help me make a meal plan? And that's not really what she did. And so her life coachness kind of came into that despite her doing this separate thing for me. And now she's actually a doula. So, which is funny. So there was that. So you've got life coach, doula, midwife. And then I started seeing a therapist. And then along the way, there's also been birth story medicine. There have been other healing books and practices that have really contributed to my healing journey. So there's just so many things. So to answer that question, I'm probably leaving something out. My yoga practice was actually a big part of healing that trauma. And when you look at the research behind yoga, and it has been found to be a good tool for healing trauma. So there are all of these things that really can play into the healing of birth trauma. But I'm going to segue back. That's just like the brief overview. I could geek out on that for hours. So
Yeah, but I think that's really helpful for people who have had an unexpected, unwanted, maybe even unnecessary C-section, who feel stuck in those emotions of like, is this what my life is forever? Like, is this where I'm going to be always? Is this just like life after a cesarean? And I wanted to start there very intentionally to say, this episode is going to be kind of raw, and you may hear things where you're like, oh my God, are they in my home listening to me? Like they are talking about my exact story, or like, oh my God, they just nailed exactly what I was feeling. And I haven't been able to put words to it, but I want you to know it's normal, like what you're feeling and what you're thinking. And the physical, the emotional, the mental, all of it is very, very normal. And I think that today's case study, that's my goal, is I want you to know that what happened to you may be able to be different in the future if you want to take the steps to kind of go through that. But it is going to be sticky and it is going to be tough. And there's a lot of really heavy emotions. But like Alexis said, You have people who can help you. You've got modalities that can help you heal and support you in this journey. We're all doing really hard work. And if this is the hard work you want to do, people like Alexis and I are here to help you in doing that. So, okay, thank you for that, Alexis. I just wanted to set the stage of like, that trauma is so normal and it's so normal to feel these things and think these things. But, sometimes it takes a lot of hard work, but we can move through that. I don't know that we'll ever move past it, but we can move through it for sure. All right. I think it's time to probably tell your birth stories. And the way I would like to do this is I'm going to keep myself muted. And when I unmute myself, that means I have a thought that I'd like to throw in there. Okay. And otherwise, I want you to just kind of tell your birth story as is. And I'm going to be taking notes on the side because I think I'm going to have a lot of downloads here. And I want to just share freely about what is coming up for me. Cool. I'm going to hand the ball to you. Take it away.
Okay. So with my son, I had a pretty typical pregnancy. I had gestational diabetes was the only kind of factor. And at that point in time, he was born in January of 2015. So I would have been pregnant in 2014. And at that time, gestational diabetes puts you into a higher risk category. So I was seeing a maternal fetal medicine doctor as well as my OBGYN. Now, my OBGYN is the same person that I had been seeing since I was a teenager. And I saw her because she was quick and efficient and got it done. And I could go on with my day just to set the stage. So I managed my gestational diabetes, and I should probably put managed in air quotes because I was a little bit manipulative with those numbers. I was, I'd be careful about what I ate when I knew I was testing. And it probably wasn't as well managed as it should have been. I had a little bit of work stress during pregnancy, but nothing crazy. And probably around Christmas, about a month before my son was born, he dropped down into my pelvis and I could feel him. And that really scared me. And so I spent Christmas reclined in the recliner, telling him to get back up there because it wasn't time yet. I thought that because he had dropped down, that meant we were going to go into labor early. And that was not happening. So I told him and he listened, and up he went. And we just moved through the rest of the pregnancy. And then around 40 and 3 is when we scheduled the induction. So, we did the post on Facebook. We're going into the hospital. Everybody's like, eat something, eat something. It's the only advice you get, right? Eat. They're not going to let you eat. So we go through the drive-through, we grab some food. We just stroll into the hospital, having a good old time for our 9 p.m. induction. So we get in there, we get situated. Now I'm going to share times with you because I, in my processing, literally exported all of my birth story notes. And side note, when I requested my records, they did not give me all of the information. There were no OR notes. It was just like a medication log.
Okay, before we dive into the birth and the times, when you were in your prenatals with your provider, you appreciated her quick efficiency. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Well, maybe not even necessarily prenatal, but before pregnancy, right? When you're going in for
totally.
that annual, it was like, bam, bam, thank you, ma'am.
Totally. That makes sense to me. But in pregnancy, I guess I'm wondering, did your instincts ever kick on, or did you ever start to wonder, like, should we be talking about more here? Or, back in 2014, maybe that wasn't even a thing. And you're like, this is just kind of what it is. And, you were able to have a doula, but I don't think doulas were super popular in 2014, right? Like when I started in 2016, I felt like education was half the battle. And so I'm wondering if throughout pregnancy, you were like, hang on, should we be like having more discussion? And how did that feel to you? And did you ever go through a process of maybe thinking like, should I change providers?
So that's a great question. So I just read like what to expect when you're expecting. And
Totally.
my doctor talked to me like I knew everything. And I mean, I didn't know what to ask. I was not terribly informed. I took a hospital birth education course.
Mm. How
The
was that? What did
only
that teach you?
it taught me basically that one third of us would walk out with a cesarean
Mm. Mhm.
and not a whole lot more. Because it was just really a bird's eye view at everything, right? It was probably 6 classes that were an hour or two long, and each class was a different topic. And so you just can't get that much information in that setting. And yeah, I don't know. It wasn't super thorough. I didn't think a lot about it. It was like, okay, great.
Yeah. I think that it's very apparent when you look at hospital classes what their agenda is because they already seeded you in your brain of like, all right, well, if you walk out here, with a C-section, then you're part of 33%. Like that's pretty normal, And for me, that really hurts my heart because I in the birth lounge try and teach people that yes, our national average is 33%, but you don't have to be part of that. And we can really avoid a lot of unnecessary C sections if I think if you had the information that you didn't have back then, but also it goes back to like whose responsibility was that? Like we would hope the hospital system would be giving us this information. We would hope that our prenatals would be filled with our doctor talking to us, not like we know everything, but asking us, what you know about this topic? Okay, here's why I suggest it. Now, how do you feel about that? I know this might be a lot of new information. Take it home, think about it. In the next 2 weeks, we're going to need to do it, or that's my recommendation, right? Something like that. And gosh, it just pains me to hear that, the prenatals were really in and out. However, I do understand too, you kind of chose her for that. It's funny how when we're teenagers and we're like young adults and like fertility and birth is not on our mind, we're like, get in, get out, get in, get out. I am the same exact way or was the same exact way. But then in pregnancy, it really does need to shift, which I think speaks to just because someone has been your OB for your whole life doesn't mean they're the right person to have your baby. And something that a lot of people do not know and are shocked. They're always like, what? You can stop having care from your regular OB. Go have a baby with a different person that is better aligned with your birth goals, and then back to your regular OB for long term care in between babies. Or maybe you stick with the years that you're having babies with the new OB that you found and you go back to your OB after you have babies. You don't have to leave the OB that you love and covet so much just because you're having babies, but you should find a temporary provider that's more aligned with your birth goals. So that's something that really stuck out to me. Okay, I also want to talk about the fact that you scared your baby emotionally, energetically up back into your pelvis, right? Because of your own fear. That I think is super powerful because a lot of us enter birth not really ever having explored those fears, right? And then if we don't have access to or don't know about getting our education outside of the hospital system, then we're never exposed to anything different that's going to eradicate that fear. And we all know, you especially know that information is the antidote to fear, right? If we're going to move through that fear, we have to have all the information that gives us the confidence to be able to do that. And so I just found it fascinating that you were so scared and your baby was like, whoa, my mom is freaked out. I better get back up here because she's freaking out. She's like really, really scared. He felt that. That's wild.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible. I think that people really, they think it's so kind of woo
Mm.
to consider that connection. But really, I mean, you're all that baby knows.
Totally. I mean, you're literally connected. If you think about your physical, like you are literally, they are basically, no, they are living in something that you created and will grow and will birth and leave your body with them. The everything, they're literally inside of you. That's the craziest thing I've ever thought of. Every time I think about, whoa, they have a baby like literally inside of them, it blows my mind.
Yeah, it's incredible. I know. I will say, just to kind of backtrack, like I did feel like my provider really did not know me at all. She barely talked to my
Wow.
husband.
Wow.
And so there were a lot of red flags, right? But I just she
We
was
didn't know
convenient.
them, right? And, like, you didn't know that they were red flags back then is what I'm hearing is, like, this is all I knew, and I love this approach, and I had no idea that it should be different in birth, and, again, it makes me sad because we would hope the hospital system would be that place, but it's just not. Because, like we're gonna hear, they profit significantly off of your birth going the way that Alexis's does. Okay, anyway, timing, I'm ready. I'm ready to go forth. So we're here
Okay.
for an induction. We're 3 days past your due date. That was intentionally chosen by you or your provider. And was there any reason behind 40 and 3?
I don't think there was really any reason. I think it
Mm,
was just, well, you're past your due date. We can schedule your induction for, next week or whatever. I don't really remember that conversation.
okay,
Of course, there were no risks or benefits even explained.
of course.
It was just like, well, you're 40 weeks and we don't see, I was getting cervical checks because that's just what you did. There was no sign of progress. I'm sure that if I had known anything about a bishop score, it would have been a big fat 0.
Yeah. You know what is sticking out to me right now? It just popped into my brain is 2014, exactly 10 years ago. Wow. We were still inducing people past their due date. Now it's like 39-week induction, 39-week induction, 39-week induction. Like you have to pretty much like really set some boundaries and just not even open the conversation for a 39-week induction in order to get to your due date these days. That is crazy too. Just think about how a little amount of time, like 10 years, has drastically changed. And our C-section rate has increased. Our maternal mortality has increased. Our infants are not doing better. Our NICU stays are increasing. Like we're headed in the wrong direction, people. We are headed in the wrong direction.
Well, and not only was that induction scheduled after 40 weeks, but you're talking about a person with gestational diabetes
Oh,
being
that's
induced
right.
after 40 weeks. Mm-hmm. And which is a little bit
Mhm.
weird because when you have that gestational diabetes, they start to worry about a big baby.
Totally.
Uh,
Was
but
that
my
ever a conversation with for you?
No, see, I was very skinny back then and
Mhm.
I lost weight with the pregnancy.
Mhm.
And so honestly, I think the MFM looked at me and said, I don't need to worry about you. Like he did his ultrasounds and whatever, but there was no concern.
Yeah.
I sent in my numbers. There was no,
How did
they
that
didn't.
feel? Was that good? Were you like, "Yeah, cool, I'm good to go," or were you like, "Wait, is someone actually checking on me?"
I mean, it didn't bother me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I felt like I was getting away with something because I was still eating the way that I shouldn't have been, and
Totally.
which is totally immature. But I mean, I was what, 25? I was barely an adult, you
Yeah.
know?
And hey, we all make mistakes. And also we all have those places in life where you're like, wow, I could have definitely made different choices there. Like we all have those moments. Okay, so take us through your induction. So you show up, a 9 p.m. induction. I gotta say I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I do not love evening inductions. So if you're out there considering an induction, have them do it during the day. You're already awake. You have a pretty charged battery. As long as you can sleep the night before, a lunchtime induction is like just perfect. It's really great. But anyway, they always persuade you with like, oh, you can come in and get some medicine and then sleep, but you never get to sleep. They're poking, they're prodding, they're coming in, the blood pressure, the temperatures, the changing of the garbage. They need to introduce the nurse student that, it's change of shift. Here's a new doctor. This doctor's on call. So anyway, that's my 2 cents about the 9 p.m. induction. But we are here. Go forth.
So we got in about 9 o'clock. Cytotech was placed at 10:45, and Cytotech is was cervical ripener, right? Because I am like 0 everything, right?
Okay.
No signs of readiness at all. So they give me the Cytotech, and actually it causes really a lot of discomfort. I think that it made me like start contracting or something. I don't know. I was pretty uncomfortable even that first night. But that's all I had at that night is Cytotech and then lactated ringers.
Just the IV fluid, yeah. So
Yep,
you're
fluids.
hooked up to an IV fluid without actually really needing a reason to be.
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
So they just get that in, they get you all hooked up, they get everything in there. So then in the morning, no change. Cervidil is placed. Okay. Nothing all day. Whole lot of nothing.
That's very typical for our team to see is that people have varied reactions to the medication. Like one might work really, really well for you and one might not. So if you get into an induction situation, you're like, I've had 2 or 3 of these cervical ripeners change to a different kind. A lot of
Mm.
times they will work or your body will respond differently. Interesting. Okay.
So then I woke up and had Cervidil. So Monday, there's really nothing on this, but sometime Monday night or Tuesday morning in the middle of the night, a Foley bulb was placed,
Okay.
and that came out on Tuesday. So we're now at what, 40 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
And the balloon comes out at like 9:11 in the morning. So that must have been what, 6 probably. I would have been dilated to like a 6. And then they broke my waters at 10:15-ish when they discovered that there was meconium in the waters. There seemed to be no concern about that, despite like I felt a little worried about it because I know
Okay.
that that's something they had talked about in birth education,
Okay.
but nobody around me seemed worried about that. So then I must have had pain relief. I must not have put that into this timeline, but they set an epidural sometime Tuesday morning.
Per your request or per their suggestion?
Oh gosh, probably my request. That Foley bulb was awful.
Okay.
So they placed the epidural and then they started Pitocin. Oh, you know what? I must have been at just 4 when the balloon came out because now here at 1:52 in the afternoon, I'm finally at 5 to 6 centimeters.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had the epidural, the Pitocin early before noon. And then around 2 was 5 to 6 centimeters. And then by 4, I was 10 centimeters.
Okay.
And I don't think there was any laboring down. I just started pushing right away.
But your baby's
So,
still looking good. So we've got meconium, you have GD, we're past your due date. We're now 5 days past your due date, and you and baby are looking good.
mhm,
Nice. Okay, we've gone all the way to 10 centimeters. So I gotta say, up until this point, other than the elective induction piece, this is it really tracks. And for people out there who are thinking, holy mother of everything, like 3 days in, kinda, yeah, especially if you're starting from 0 to 0, right? Like we got a lot of work to do. We first have to get your cervix nice and squishy, and then we can help it open up. But that squishiness usually takes a whole day or so, depending on how receptive your body is to the medication. So, yeah, okay, I don't disagree with anything that has happened. However, one question clarified: your waters broke naturally, or they broke them?
they broke them.
They broke them. I usually try and stay away from that as well, especially because this was an elective induction, right? So we want to consider that if your waters are intact and you're not in active labor, which at that point you were, 4 to 6 centimeters, there's an argument there that you could go home. We could argue that you're not in active labor, depending on how you determine active labor. Now it is 6 centimeters, but not all providers are going to agree with that. Your waters need to be intact and you need to not be making any progress. And so if your waters are still there, you might be able to go home. Now, you may have to sign out AMA. It doesn't mean that your provider is going to support that. It doesn't mean that your provider is going to suggest that, but it does mean that it's an option. And at one point in time, ACOG did suggest that and they supported that. I haven't checked in many months now to see if that's still up, but they have sometimes been a little sneaky and taken things down that I think are changing. But at one time, I know I have screenshots of them saying, like, if you are at an elective induction, it's not working, you may leave and come back a different day. So anyway, okay, they broke your waters. What was that discussion like?
Oh gosh. This was so long ago.
Or
I
was it not
don't
a discussion?
Yeah, I don't know that it was really much of a discussion.
Yeah.
I had no idea, right? I thought you just did what they said.
Mhm. Mhm.
Nothing really for me was much of a discussion. It was just like, okay, well, what does my doctor say? That's what we'll do.
Yeah. I think a lot of people end up in C-sections that they did not want and did not plan for and did not see as part of their story for that exact reason. I think they say, I assumed I could trust my provider, and I thought that we were on the same page. I thought they would want for me what I wanted for myself, and now, having been through it, I understand that that was not the case. So, yeah, okay. Alright, so we're at 10 centimeters, our waters are broken, we've got meconium, nobody's worried, and we're pushing.
Yes, and I will say, like, my doctor did I had lunch that day, so I had no clue. I don't think that they tell you ahead of time, if they're a doctor like this, that an induction is gonna take several days.
Mm,
So that I was
mhm.
not prepared for.
'Kay.
But my cousin did bring me lunch both days. I had people in and out the whole time
And
'cause
they
it
let
was
you
just
freely eat, nobody was trying to stop you from eating or anything, or did they?
well, so the nurses, the, like, hospital policy is probably that you weren't supposed to be eating, but they checked with my doctor and she was fine with it. And
Nice,
so,
okay,
yeah.
alright.
So then I started pushing at 4 o'clock, and the nurse is like, oh my gosh, there's your baby's head. This is not going to be long. Right. I mean, we could see his head. And so I'm pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. I have the epidural. I'm laying down, knees up, stirrups part of the time, people holding my knees the other part of the time. Seriously, nothing
Hmm,
for 2 hours. And so the nurse, and okay, at this point, my doctor's not even there, right? She's still
mhm.
over at the clinic. She's going to stop at home and have dinner because I don't know. She knows probably.
Yeah. Now, can you
So,
feel your legs? Are you pretty mobile with your epidural or no, it's pretty dense?
no, yeah,
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah, it's really
dense.
dense.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so that's another thing. Just like, if we want babies to be able to navigate the pelvis, you guys, we have to be able to feel it. And that may be different than your anesthesiologist's goal. They might want you completely numb. So you're going to need to speak up and say, hey, I would actually like to feel my legs and stuff. I would like to have a good balance of proper, adequate pain relief where it kind of takes away the edge of these contractions, but I still would like to be mobile. And I also want you to be prepared that your doctors and your nurses may not be in support of this. They may really not want you to be in different positions, but ACOG does say that they support you in birthing in whatever position feels best to you, with or without an epidural. And so you should never allow someone to tell you that you can't move positions if your body is telling you to. If you feel a little hesitant about it, you can always ask, what's the reason you don't want me to get up? Or are me and my baby safe right now? And then that can help inform you whether you're ready to move your body. But, you know, having your epidural to a place where you can feel things is really, really key. It's super important. Alexis, was there a discussion with your anesthesiologist about your placement of your epidural? And did any medical professional ever suggest to you or bring up to you like, hey, we could turn this down if you like are feeling too numb?
None of that. No.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Mm. Okay.
No. And the epidural had to be placed twice. I mean, there were plenty of opportunities. There was no
Wow.
conversation. There was no informed consent.
Wow. Talk to us
Um,
about having to have your epidural placed twice. How come?
I don't even know what
Mm.
happened, but I just know in the records it said it was placed twice. And I remember it being placed twice, but I don't remember why. I was
Mm.
really uncomfortable and everything was really just fuzzy, especially, yeah, after all those drugs. I will say that epidural was placed at like 10:40 in the morning. So you're
Mm.
talking about having that epidural basically the whole time that my cervix was dilating. I was in bed, right? There is no movement, nothing.
Mm. Were you flipping side to side at least, or no, just basically kinda on
Probably
your
a
back?
little bit.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay. Yeah.
mhm.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
So then we're pushing for about 2.5 hours almost. Well, not even. So 2 hours and 20 minutes. And the nurse and the resident are exchanging glances with each other.
And you're
Right.
picking
And
up
I
on
am
this.
like,
You can see it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the energy in the room has shifted. There's glances going on. The resident said to me, I think we need to start thinking about a cesarean. I am nervous to use forceps on you. So I don't think that she said anything. I don't think anything had happened with his heart rate yet. So she said that. And I said, okay, well, what does my doctor think? I said, and so they called my doctor and she said, yeah, it's really up to you. If you want to keep trying, you can keep trying. At that point, there was no emergency. It would basically have been an elective cesarean
Mm-hmm.
at that point. And, she said, I'm 5 minutes away. I'll be right there and we'll do your cesarean. So, that was 2 hours of pushing where we could literally see his head. It was just, I think there was probably some malpositioning, but
Mm-hmm. Do you
um,
think if you got in a different position, he might would have come out? Like if you had been able to get in hands and knees or in some sort of like Captain Morgan or like using the birth bar?
I'm not certain because I will say there was a lot of back labor throughout the
Mm,
whole thing. My back
sure.
was awful. And so I don't know if he would have been, even if with a change of position, if that would have resolved it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think probably when he went back up that month prior,
Mm-hmm.
I think that then when he got back into a
Drop back
position, it
down.
was not. Mhm.
Yeah.
That's just my guess.
It makes sense because remember you said you spent a couple weeks or a couple days lounging like backwards to try and encourage him. That is a position that we really try and stay away from just because it does sometimes make babies get in funky positions because we're opening up like the wrong part of our bodies. So it does make sense. I think your intuition is really on point there.
So, I mean, kind of going back to that education piece, right? That's nothing that was discussed in hospital
Oh,
birth
sure.
education
Yeah.
was about positioning. There was nothing, even no education about like what that dropping down would feel like. And that really,
Mm.
that's an appropriate thing to happen, right? Like a month before your due date, just under a month, even. I mean, that was probably 3 weeks before my due date. So that was really an appropriate place for him to be,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
it did not mean that labor was, like, coming in the next few hours, even though, at the time, that's what you had thought. Yeah, it would have been super helpful, but again, we've circled back to, again, we would hope the hospital would do this for us, and they're just not, which is the importance of finding that third party childbirth education. Like, you need to be having childbirth education outside of the hospital system, not taught by people who are associated with the hospital. So, yeah, okay. All right.
So that was probably 6:25-ish that they had that conversation. Again, my doctor's like 5 minutes from the hospital, probably less than 2 minutes after getting off of the phone with my doctor. My legs went back down to a normal laying down position. They started prepping me slow and steady, just getting ready to go to the OR. No big deal. Well, somewhere in there, his heart rate changed. And actually, I think they normally worry about the heart rate going down, but his went up.
Mm.
And so all of a sudden, it was emergent. And my room was like flooded with people. And then Derek is like getting my husband, they brought him like stuff to put over his clothes.
Mm.
And so he's like getting all geared up to go in with us. Right. And so then as we were rolling down, we were probably the closest room to the OR, probably for a reason. But as we were just like running down the hallway, somebody is telling my husband he cannot come with us. And so we're rounding the corner into the OR, and all of a sudden he cannot come with us. So we stroll in, we're going through the doors, and I hear my doctor's voice, which felt really reassuring to me, right? Because I know that this lady's bedside manner is not great. She is wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. This woman is 100% a surgeon. If there is a place I want her to be, it is in that OR. So I have down here that we were in the OR at 6:29 based on the medications given to me. I was freaking out because I was very cold. I felt really unsafe. I'm sure that my arms were like strapped down and I just wanted them on my chest. And I said that. I said, I just want my arms on my chest. And I am assuming it was the medication, but then I felt a heat come up. There was this poor student up by my head because, of course, there was a
Mhm. Of course, there's
student
a
in
student
there.
in there. Yeah.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. And so that was at 6:29 that medication would have been prescribed, and my son was out by 6:30. I want to say it was 6:36, but it says 6:38 on my paper. But they got him out pretty quickly and passed off to the NICU team. He was not crying, which they reassured me they did not want him to be crying because of the meconium. They did not want him to inhale meconium
Mm,
into his lungs. But either way, they had to suction out meconium.
mhm, mhm.
So the NICU team had him. I was over still on the table, just trying to hear what was going on with him, right? I'm not getting any updates because they're taking care of him. And the team working on me is taking care of me.
But not telling you what they're doing. They're just doing.
Nobody is telling me anything this whole time.
And where's your husband?
And so then my husband was just left in that back room. There are videos. He took videos of himself, like to share with me later. I don't know. My husband videos things. And
Yeah.
so, oh, they're just so sad. And it is,
Yeah.
he was terrified and just nobody was updating him. And so that's
Oh.
what. So if we're in the OR at 6:29, it would have been a minimum of 10 minutes before he would have came back to ski. They brought him in and he got to hold Augie or see him. I don't think he really got to hold him, but he had video going in the OR, which is, I think, like a big no-no, but he's got the video pointed at the ground and you can like hear stuff.
Yeah.
And so, of course, this is also right at shift change. So they're getting ready to take my son to the NICU. And this nurse, God bless her, she goes, "Can mom see the baby before you take him?" They weren't even show it to me.
Wow.
So, the NICU nurse brought him over and I got to see him. And then they took him. And then I sent my husband with because I wanted him to be with the baby. And my best friend had had a NICU baby. She's a type 1 diabetic. So I don't think it was, a surprise, but I remember that being like a thing. And so ahead of time, I had said, if there's any kind of NICU thing, you need to go with the baby. So they're gone, right?
Mhm.
They went to the NICU together. Derek followed. So now I'm just on the operating table and they were digging around my uterus. Like I could feel like kind of like scraping and clawing. And
Oh,
not to describe it like that sounds awful, but that's what it was like. And I said, "What is going on? I can feel you digging around."
inside of me.
Yes. So then
Yeah.
my doctor, the surgeon that she is, snaps at the anesthesiologist. Why is she feeling this?
Not explaining what she's doing or why she's doing it, but complaining that you can feel it. Oh my God. I am not well. Mm-mm.
Oh, it's not funny, but it's just a little astonishing that you just can't help but laugh.
Yeah. Astonishing is a great word. Like, I am truly baffled. Oh boy.
So I didn't even really wait for an answer after that, right? I feel like I yelled. It may have come out as a whisper, it may have come out as a yell. I have no idea. But I just said, I want to be asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so that's literally the last thing I remember. They put me out under general and they finished.
Do you know what they were doing in there?
So there was meconium in my abdominal cavity. So there was meconium outside of my uterus. So she was searching my uterus for any signs of a hole or a tear or anything like that, which she did not find.
So it must have
Uh,
happened when they cut into your amniotic sac. It must have gone places.
so either it happened when she cut through, or I don't really know a lot about it, but I had wondered if just the stress of the induction, can that like push anything through?
I would not think so, no. No, it really does seem like probably when she cut through it just, maybe things spurted out or maybe she was a little careless. Maybe it's just, her style to be that fast and efficient. And through that, the rate of error just increases naturally. Yeah. Yikes. Okay. But also, I mean, yikes, but also we would like her to do that. Like you can't just leave baby poop inside of your abdomen that then you're going to be at risk for infection, which as a C-section, you're automatically getting antibiotics, and it is recommended. That's a very well studied thing. If you have a C-section, we do want you to get antibiotics pushed through that. It does have significant positive impacts on infection rates. So even still, we don't want to leave poop inside of you because that, just increases your risk for infection. Okay, so yikes, but also thank you.
Yeah. So that was that. That took, a couple hours. She called in the MFM. She called in, her husband was also an OB and he happened to be in the hospital. So she's like, can you come look at this? Like it does not seem like she thought it was user error at all. It seems like she was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. So,
Just like convinced that something was wrong with your uterus and somehow it has gotten
mhm.
leaked out. That is so interesting. And I'm certainly not saying that's not the case. It's just I've never heard of such and it doesn't seem anatomically possible. And then for her not to find any sort of rupture or dissonance or anything. So okay. All right.
Which you're not alone in that opinion. The doctor that I had with my second did not say that, of course, but she also did not seem concerned at
Mm-hmm.
all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas that first doctor that had happened with, like I had to come in 6 months later and do, is it an HCG where they do the dye test through to make sure everything's going through the right places.
Gosh, I don't know. I'm not familiar.
That's usually
Um,
in fertility that they do that.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like tests that they would do to test like fallopian tube stuff. And is that what you're talking about? We're pushing dye through your reproductive organs to make sure everything's connected and working as normal. And she did that because of the meconium that had appeared in your abdomen.
Correct.
And that test resulted in being normal.
Yes.
Okay, so now I do stand by this was her era. I stand by that. Your body has proved to us it's working. Wow.
Well, yeah.
Totally.
So,
Okay.
but of course, I didn't know that. And so
Sure.
after I did all this research about like even uterine windows and things
Mm-hmm.
like that, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
trying to make sense of what happened.
Sure. Sure. And you didn't have the OR notes, right? And you didn't have a timeline of when meds were given and at what dosage. It was basically just a log of what you got totally in your stay. Interesting. You think that was on purpose?
So I did not request those until years later.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that was on purpose that they didn't send that or if, but I mean, I requested all my records. So
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that was Augie's birth.
What was the recovery period like? I mean, they took you to postpartum and then everything was pretty straightforward and what you can expect from typical C-section recovery after that, or no, there was some further complications.
So, I mean, technically, there weren't necessarily further complications. They had put
Right.
a drain in.
Okay.
Just, do you know, like when somebody has their breasts done, they put in a drain for any excess fluid. So
Yeah,
it's kind
that's
of like
not
that.
very normal with C-sections, right? Your
No.
typical C-section is not going to have that. So I would certainly, in my opinion, call that a complication.
Yes, and it wasn't like a postpartum hemorrhage or anything
Sure.
super.
Sure.
So, of course, now that I've been in this birth trauma world, I've just like, to me, that's like really no big deal compared to some of the other things, which, of course, we don't
Sure.
compare trauma,
Sure.
right? And I can tell you that till I'm blue in the face, but a lot of us will still do it and say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, really, that drain was not a big deal.
Not a big deal, but also not part of the normal expected C-section recovery that we see. And both of those can exist, right? Like, yes, it may not
Right.
have been traumatic for you and or compared to your neighbor's sister, mom's trauma, it wasn't a lot. Or even other trauma that you've accumulated. It may not seem like a lot, but it's also not normal. So yeah, okay. How was that? And what for? Were you having excess fluid? I assume so.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of drainage from
Okay.
that region. I don't know if the drain went through to just my abdominal cavity, I would guess, to get rid of any excess fluid. I don't remember even if they were checking for any discoloration.
Mhm.
That part's pretty fuzzy to me. Of course,
Mhm.
that whole time, I will stand by this. This is something that really bothered me in the aftermath was that the postpartum floor was on a separate floor from the NICU.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of hospitals are like that. And I know that there are a lot of good reasons, but I really think that they should have more options where the NICU has some adjoining postpartum rooms
Mhm.
because the nurse wants to see me for my fundal abuse massage for medications. I was taking, of course, I had the IV antibiotics. And then I had like painkillers that then they had to distribute, right? And then I was trying to be like in the NICU and in the postpartum floor. And it was just an
It's just a
ordeal because
lot. Yeah.
right, you'd get up to postpartum and then they'd call and say, you need to come try to breastfeed, or so and so doctor is here. It was a lot. But with the drain, I was able to have an extra day. This is and the NICU, I mean, that's a whole nother we can't probably go there today, but I will say that they would not release my son on that Friday. So he was born Tuesday. They would not release him Friday, despite, we were coerced into giving him formula. And despite having done that and having the appropriate amount of wet diapers and this and that and everything checked out, they were not willing to release him unless he was released to the nursery. And
Mm.
so my doctor said, well, that's fine. We'll just write you another day. Your drain is still in. So you'll just stay in the postpartum wing for another day and then they'll release him. And so we had him in the nursery then from Friday to Saturday. And then we were released Saturday evening. So that's almost a whole week in the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, NICU is a special place of its own. I think there are some really, really great moments and some really special angels. And then there are some really traumatic moments where you're like, come on. Like, there's no way that you felt like that was the right choice in the moment. I just will never believe it with these parents that are struggling so badly and their children are, they're seeing their kids in a position in a space that no one has ever, ever, ever prepared for. And then some of the treatment is just kind of crazy and unreal. Okay. I feel like we got a good idea of your first birth. Is there anything else that you're like, no, we need to say this in order to prep them for your second birth?
Just that in the follow up, when she was talking to us about the birth the next day,
Your doctor, your OBGYN.
she really, which I think I had already said that though, is that she had made the comment, if you can have another, we'll jump straight to a cesarean.
Mm-hmm.
And really, it was emphasized just how dangerous it could be for me to get pregnant anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Because of the incision site on your uterus, because it was going to be a VBAC, right? That's what she's specifically talking about, or no? She's talking
I
about
don't,
your birth experience.
I think it was about the complication of the meconium
Interesting.
coming out. And so the way that she was really makes me feel like maybe she did not have any idea what was going on.
Interesting.
But there was one other thing. So when she was telling my mom and my brother-in-law about what happened, because they were the ones in my room while my husband was in the NICU, and she did not know that that was not my husband.
Okay. All
Mhm.
right. Hey, been with me since I was 14 years old, but you don't even know my husband. It's fine. Totally fine.
It's
Okay.
fine. It's fine, everything's fine.
Oh my gosh.
Um, so she had told them that when she opened me up, he was looking right up at her.
Mhm.
So he had been sunny side up.
Mhm.
So that's I don't know if it's necessary to know for the VBAC, but
I mean,
yeah.
not in my opinion. It's, sunny side up is a normal variation of normal. It sucks because it's harder and it's like not the optimal position, but those babies can definitely come out vaginally. I've seen so many of them. You do push a little bit longer and you do have to work a little bit harder, and they do, have less room to kind of navigate the pelvis. And that's okay. We really should prioritize upright, well, labor and birth if we know your baby is sunny side up in labor. But no, I don't think so. It also makes sense too. Remember, he had been down and then he went back up and then he came down again. So that could also play into it as well. And not having that straight spine. Actually, I'll link for you guys a little download that I have that teaches you how to keep your belly button straight, and it'll help you kind of encourage your baby into the optimal position. So that's super helpful. Okay, cool. Good to keep that in the front of our minds, but I don't know that it's necessarily going to impact your VBAC. So, my first question about your VBAC is, you had mentioned being just like totally overwhelmed and overcome with emotion when you were reading through that VBAC information that came from the midwives. What was going through your mind? What was the realization that you had that made you so emotional?
Hmm. I don't know. I think it was just the fear of doing that again
Hmm. So
and
not
just
eagerness, not happy, not like, "Oh my god, this is a possibility for me," but like, "Oh my god, I'm here again after I said I would never do it again."
yeah.
Mm.
So, and I want to kind of separate those things, right? Like when I was pregnant, I literally, or pregnant the second time, I literally said, I can't do this again.
Mm.
But when I was looking through the VBAC stuff, that was a separate timetable, right? So that was 6 months before I was even pregnant again. And so that one was like, I mean, if it goes awful, I can't just like live like this again.
Yeah. Did your first C-section have any impacts on you and Augie's bonding or your breastfeeding relationship or your mental health? What did that look like?
Okay. So that, I mean, aside from the flashbacks, right, was anytime that I would try to watch anything, like hear birth stories, see a birth announcement, anything like that, all super triggering.
Mhm.
So mental health wise, there was that. There was a lot of hypervigilance, a lot of like, okay, this one's going to sound crazy, but I'm just going to say it. I tr- I tried to basically erase our carbon footprint. I went
Mm.
excessively zero waste
Mm. Mhm.
because we weren't supposed to have lived.
Wow, yeah.
And
Yeah,
so,
just like really intrusive, controlling thoughts. What were your flashbacks when you had flashbacks? What were they? Were they to Augie's heart rate dropping? Were they racing down the hallway? Were they, them digging around in your belly? All the above?
honestly, I can't even remember. I want to say it was being in the OR,
Mm.
open, not really knowing what was going to
Mhm.
happen. I know that on the way into the OR, I did have that thought like, oh, okay, this is it. I'm going to die. Please just let this baby be okay.
Oh no.
And so I think that those were like in a lot of the flashbacks, I was definitely like on the hospital bed, horizontal.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah, it was just that
Yeah.
fear. Hmm.
Yeah, just deep, deep stuff. You can
Yeah.
just see how you've changed as a human, right? Like, you are not the same person that you went into that OR as. And I think that that's lost a lot of the time in the hospital system, because for them, it was just like another Wednesday. That's all it was. It was just like another day at the office, and like, okay, another induction turn C-section. You see it every day, but this mom doesn't see that every day. This is their life. This is their one chance to do that birth. They are literally a different human. This imprinted on them and who they are and who they will be going forward. And it is deep, and the hospital system really, really brushes over that. And I think that in and of itself, that feeling of being brushed over when it was literally a life-changing event is traumatic in itself.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, its impact was far and wide. And
Yeah.
I talk openly about that a lot of places, but I can't even begin to cover all of the ways it impacted my life.
Mm,
I mean, all the way from, you know, breastfeeding and my relationship with my husband to my work life, right? I tried
yep.
to go back to work outside of the home away from him and had awful intrusive thoughts,
Yeah.
which I mean, intrusive thoughts, especially in the postpartum period, are normal to a degree, right?
Mhm. Yep.
But the level at which they impact your life is
Totally.
then the marker by which, really extra support is needed.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's shift back to your VBAC. Did we change doctors? Or did we get away from this doctor who was like, I don't believe in your body, basically, and not too many words?
Yeah, absolutely. So the midwife group that I had started out, getting information from is who I set my first appointment with. But before I
Who gave
even
you the
saw them,
VBAC information packet? The same people.
correct.
Okay.
But in that practice, you change midwives, right? So I can't remember what that's called. But you don't have the same person every appointment.
Totally.
So, all within the first 12 weeks, I had met with that home birth midwife that I had mentioned in the beginning of the podcast and just talked to her about things. And so she recommended a family care doctor, which is who I'm in Nebraska. And sometimes people think that home birth is illegal in Nebraska, but it is not illegal to home birth anywhere. It is illegal for a CNM to attend your birth. So this home birth midwife, so she would have been going for her CPM, her certified professional midwife, right? Midwifery license or whatever. So she recommended the family care doctor that she had her own clients use. And so he is the person that I actually started my care with. However, as great as he was phenomenal, like phenomenal. I don't think I've ever had a better doctor, maybe aside from the one that I ended up with. But he read through, I mean, I kid you not, this thing is at least probably like 5/8 of an inch thick, right? It is like over half an inch thick of a packet of Augie's birth records. He read through the entire thing and he came in and he greeted me and he greeted my husband and he said, "Whoa, what the heck happened?" And we talked about that birth. We talked about a lot of stuff. And he spent so much time with every patient that probably just over halfway through, I said, "Okay, I'm waiting for him for an hour. It's taking me a half hour to park. I cannot keep seeing this guy. I hate going to this place." So, as great as
Even though
he
you loved
was,
him. Yeah. Even though
yes.
you loved him.
So, I had even mentioned at the time I was teaching, and I said to my teaching partner, "Oh, I would complain about going every time." She was like, Alexis, if you really don't want to go this badly every time, do you think you're seeing the right provider?
Nice. Was that girl
I
a doula?
know.
We love that.
So we had a really great relationship, her and I. And so, yeah, I did talk to my doula about, who she thought. I talked to my therapist about who she thought. And I looked on we had such an active ICANN local
Nice.
group that I could really see. And that's how I found my doula. She was like the top recommendation for VBAC. And so
Nice.
then I switched doctors. And so I switched to a doctor that is pretty natural minded. People have called her the most midwife like OB. Part of the reason I switched from family care too is because I knew that I wanted to know the person cutting me open if I were to have a repeat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this doctor shows up for her births,
Oh, cool.
which
That's
is
awesome.
not something all doctors do.
Yeah, I would say that's super duper rare. Okay, before you go on, does that first doctor, the guy doctor that we really liked, but it was hard to park and he was so thorough with his clients, does his reaction of like, "Whoa, what happened?" clue you in to like, "Holy shit, what happened in my first birth was like not normal." And I'm telling you, it just feels in my gut that a lot of it was iatrogenic. Like it just feels like, especially when another OB is like, "Whoa, what happened here?" You know?
Yeah, that felt really validating. And yeah, so that was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you've changed to this new doctor. How do you like them?
She is quick, concise. She talks fast. She's efficient.
Okay.
I don't know that she read the whole thing, but she had no shock about my previous birth.
Okay.
She said, but I did ask, I just want to make sure that you think this is safe. We had this test done and found nothing to be wrong with my uterus. And she was like, yeah, I think it's probably fine.
Okay.
She's not passing me on to anybody else. Whereas the family care doctor had said, I would have to check with the OBs just to make sure
That makes
because he's
sense.
a family care provider and not an
Sure.
OB.
Sure.
But so she actually had been at a birth. And so she was like super late for my first appointment.
Okay.
But I
You
had
are
this,
you like so triggered? You're like, okay, I've got all the things happening.
yeah, it was, they gave me a heads up and they said, she's at a birth. Do you want to wait? Do you want to reschedule?
Got it.
So I waited. And of course, I was just super nervous. My husband did not come to that one, whereas he had been to every single appointment. But like, how many things can you go to? And at this point, this is an extra appointment because I was checking out a new provider, and
Totally.
so it's not even really a necessary appointment. I was probably about 28 weeks during this interview. And so she's talking fast. She's ready to go on. She's like, and then I pull out my notebook. She sits back down and she gets comfortable and she says, okay, shoot.
Got a lot to talk about. Nice. I mean, that's ideal, right? Like, that's what we want. We want a provider that is going to take the time. And when you call them back, they recognize, like, all right, I was a little bit too rushed for this patient. Like, they want a little bit more time. Nice. How did that feel? You must have been like, wait, who is this miracle unicorn doctor?
Yeah. So it felt really good that she was like, she was moving quick. She was answering all my questions, but then she saw that I had more written down and she just settled in and was like, okay, I'll do it. And so it felt like it was really reaffirming that
Nice.
this is a good move to go ahead and switch. So then I saw her at like 28 weeks, which meant I was late for my gestational diabetes test, which of course was on my list of questions. Like I was not doing that test
Okay.
that I will test for 2 weeks straight. I'll do whatever, but I'm not taking that stupid yucky test.
Okay. Yep.
So yeah,
Now, were you a little bit more informed at this point, or did your first birth experience having being diagnosed with gestational diabetes kind of inform the way that you made your choice this time?
both.
Okay,
I had taken hypno babies. My doula was
totally.
a hypno doula.
Okay.
So I had the hypno babies birth class information. I think that was probably just starting around then. But I also just wasn't going to do that again.
Sure.
And I was at a point where I was done listening to doctors. I
Yeah.
was making my own choices and doing my own research.
Yeah. Cool.
So, yeah. So that was that. And I switched, and the rest of it was pretty typical. She was not super pushy when, in terms of like induction planning,
Okay.
despite it being a VBAC. But I will say that I got to probably like 38 and something, and she did want to put one on the books as we got closer to like 40 or 41. She was like, I know you want to go past, but if we can get it on the books so that you're on the schedule, that'd be great. Well, I did not want to be on the schedule.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and that was like a conversation at 39 weeks that we would have put in induction for like what, 41. So I started doing all of the things to try and get labor going, which is not something that I recommend now. I don't know how often you recommend people do that because I do feel that like natural induction is still an induction.
Totally. I was just thinking in my head, like, gosh, do I say this really kind of it's not harsh. It's just like very blunt and straightforward. Like you said. So I started doing all these things and I thought, goodness, you still didn't trust your body to kind of do it, right? But you say like, how often do you recommend it? You were kind of in a rock and a hard place. It's like, all right, I do, if I'm going to birth in the hospital system, then I do have parameters around which I can do that, right? We have had a number of mothers go past 42 weeks. And here in the Boston area, your doctors literally discharge you from care. I mean, you literally do not have a doctor following your case. And so when you show up to the hospital, it is as if you are just like a one-time admit, right? Like there's no doctor that has followed you past 42 weeks, and it puts women in a bad predicament. And instead of our hospital system recognizing that ACOG recognizes that about 10% of pregnancies are going to go past 42 weeks, they leave these women with no options. And so then these women are either scrambling to do what they need to do to birth within these parameters that are not going to be applicable for 10% of people, or they are stuck with no medical care. And it's tough. It's really, really tough. We recently had a mom go through this, and at the end of the day, she was really happy with her birth and how it turned out and the decisions that she made. But it was such a fight all the way through that even though she's happy and she's satisfied and she likes her birth story, I think it was a little tainted by the pushback that she got from her providers, because it just sucks to feel like you don't support me and you don't believe in my body, and I'm coming to you telling you I understand the risk and I'm willing to take them on to go past 42 weeks. I still would like you to help support me in guiding my care and helping me understand. And the medical system is just so unwilling to meet women while where they're at. And it is so disheartening. It really is. And to see the fear that happens when people feel like, "Oh my god, I don't have a medical provider," is just it's heartbreaking to me. So, it's very individualized. If you're truly concerned about having your baby before 42 weeks and you really, really wanna birth within the hospital system as you know it, then by all means do that, because I believe that's probably better for your mental health than going past 42 weeks if that's not a risk you're willing to take. But if you are willing to take that risk and you're willing to see the medical system as kind of like one-time interactions after that 42 weeks, because what you get today may be totally different than what you get tomorrow, and that's not necessarily true in pregnancy, but you truly are kind of rogue after that 42 weeks. If that's something you're willing to take on, then I support your autonomy in doing that. I support your choice in doing it, and I've seen a lot of people do it because they're just not willing to succumb to that invisible, imaginary, arbitrary pressure that the hospital system puts on you. Do not forget that an AMA works for you. An AMA does not threaten your doctor and say, I think you're negligent. It says, you have told me the risk, and I still am willing to take these on, and I would still like to work together. I am almost absolving you of the responsibility, although in litigation doesn't quite work like that. It is a peace offering to say, I feel comfortable with the risk that we've talked about, and I'm still choosing to make my own decision. So yeah, it's tricky. It really sucks when the system lays the hammer down and we feel like we don't have anywhere to go.
Yeah, I think it's really crappy and can make people feel like, do I take the gamble
Mm,
and discontinue care? Because that's what it is, right? It is a gamble. You don't know
totally.
if you're going to come into this hospital and you don't know who you're going to get.
Or
Whereas
how they're
if,
gonna treat you because of how they feel about the decisions that you make, right? And that sucks. It really sucks. Some doctors are really good at it and they can put their own personal bias aside and their own, like, I wouldn't want that for myself aside. And then some doctors just they can't. They just are just incapable. And it's really tough. It's so hard to be on the receiving end of that.
exactly, I just got goosebumps because that's exactly it. It is. I mean, you hear, or at least I do. I don't know if people in general hear these stories, but you hear horror stories of people really getting treated really crappy because
Mhm.
somebody doesn't agree. You know, especially in Nebraska, sometimes we'll have home birth transfers,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it's awful sometimes the way that they're treated. And I think it's getting better, but
Because of that provider's belief around home birth, with it, which is often skewed and not even based in the evidence, because we know for the mass majority of people, home birth is a very, very safe option. Obviously, there are things that will risk you out of it, both medical conditions and like location and just the skill set of providers that you have around you access. But for the mass majority of people, home birth is a safe option. And sometimes your hospital providers are just massively, massively misinformed on that, and it does jade the care that they give. That's terrible.
I know. So, it is a risk that you have to weigh when you're making that decision.
Yeah.
And I wanted this provider.
Yeah.
And she never, ever threatened care. We had had conversations about how long I could go. It was theoretically fine, right?
Yeah.
But that idea that, okay, when you come in on Monday, we're going to check things out and we're going to go ahead and schedule something, right? Having that
Looming over
even,
you.
right, like looming over you, that not necessarily even that you're going to go in for an induction, but just that I was going to have to schedule one had
Yeah.
me antsy.
Well, it's like, oh my God, this again. Like I already did this. I did this the last time.
And I was not having an induction
Totally.
because
Totally.
I was still, the amount of things that you can do, even in therapy, and the amount of processing that you can do when you are pregnant and already preparing to birth again is actually a little bit limited, right?
Mm.
There are some things that you can't dive into. There are some modalities that my therapist did not feel like we should use while I was pregnant, right? Because you don't want to put things backwards. At some point, when you're pregnant again, you have to just look forward and get through
Yeah.
that pregnancy.
Yeah. Mm.
So there is like a lot of healing that happened after I had my daughter, but I had to do enough to get through this birth. And so I went ahead and started doing some home induction. I was doing like Miles circuit, like
Okay.
really simple stuff, Miles circuit, the stairs, which I had been doing like curb walking in Miles circuit. My daughter was born on the 10th, and I had been doing it on Halloween when we went trick or
Okay.
treating.
Yeah.
So I'd been kind of doing those things to prepare my body. I'd been eating the dates. Oh gosh, did I love dates? And this is really cool. So, you know how your what's the recommended amount of dates? Like 6 dates
A day.
a,
Yep.
a day. Well, as we were working our way up towards my due date, of course, you can't eat as much as you get into that third
Sure.
trimester. So I was living on these smoothies, and my body naturally wanted them to be sweeter. And
Mm.
so, like, the smoothie started out with 2 dates in it, and then it was 4. And then, just as my body wanted that more sugar and more sweetener, I was able to add more dates.
Nice.
Yeah, which I was monitoring my blood sugar that whole time too, but I don't think we did an extra growth scan. I don't really remember, but I
And you
didn't
didn't
turn
do
down
any
any
of
scans.
this. You didn't do any of this with your first birth, right?
Oh
The
God, I knew
dates,
nothing about.
the yeah.
Oh no, the
Okay.
primrose oil. I was taking
Okay.
evening primrose oil. I was having red raspberry leaf tea.
Okay.
And so, of course, I made that more concentrated as we got to that. Oh, we're going to have to book your induction soon. And then I was in this meeting leaning over the table. So I had like the pressure on my belly, and I lost my mucus plug at 39 and maybe 39 on the dot
Okay.
because I lost my mucus plug. And that was probably after that appointment. And then I had really strong contractions that day. I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. And which is so funny. So, the power of manifestation, I had said my whole pregnancy, I'm going to go into labor on November 7th. And
Okay.
and that's the day I lost my mucus plug. And then I had pretty heavy duty contractions. By the end of the day, I was having to like pause while I was talking and like lean on a desk through the wave and then finish my conversation.
Okay.
So I finished getting everything ready. I stayed late at work and I skipped out on my evening meeting because I was like, there's no way I'm going into a meeting. My principal kept trying to get me out of the building. She's like, we're not delivering a baby here. Please leave.
Go home.
And I'm like, let me just get situated. Let me just get everything ready so that I can be gone. Well, I got home and my husband had a cold and I was like, dude, you cannot be sick. And literally contractions stopped.
Oh
All done.
no.
So then everything stops. We eat spicy food. I go to work the next day. Nothing. Then that Thursday, so that was Wednesday that my mucus plug came out and the contractions came. And I was so excited too. Like, I was so excited to be having real contractions. And like, it's not something I ever felt with my son because I didn't notice them at first. And then it was just such a different experience with all the other interventions going on.
Totally. Well, they were augmented contractions too. So from the very beginning, they were never your own, right?
Right.
So they're always going to feel different. All right.
So that was pretty exciting. So then that was Wednesday. Then Thursday, they went away. Then Thursday night, we had intercourse. And then Friday in the middle of the night, I felt something wet and I was like sleeping. So I just like
Nice.
wrote it off. And then I got out of bed and had a little gush. And so that was like 6 a.m. And I waited. I didn't call my doctor till the office was open. And I called and said, my water broke, but I'm not feeling anything. I don't want to come in. And so, they said, well, we'll talk to your doctor, whatever. But usually they recommend at least within 12 hours you come in. So that day I walked, I pumped, I was on the ball, all these things, but there was not a single contraction. So
now, were you familiar with the data around this that, GBS negative, you are probably good to stay home, 24 hours or so. Most people are having contractions by 24 hours, but not always. So just check for infection, make sure you're feeling your baby. You didn't know any of that.
So not really, no.
Okay.
Nothing that I had learned. The thing about hypnobabies is they don't necessarily want you to take any other class. And I think part of that is the way that they present their information and the way that the subconscious mind works. Right. And so I really did appreciate hypnobabies. However, there were some gaps.
Sure.
And which I'm sure that everything has.
I was just about to say, I don't know that anything is going to have no gaps ever, right? Like that feels like a pretty impossible ask. It's like asking someone to know everything. Like you just can't expect one source of anything to really be your source of everything. That's pretty unfair.
Exactly. And so I did not really know. All I knew was that my doctor had said, her office, I guess I should say, had said 12 hours. And so she called me personally, probably around like 4 in the afternoon. She said, well, it doesn't sound like you're in labor.
Oh, no.
And I said, well, it sure doesn't feel like it either. And she said, I still think you should come in, at around the 12-hour mark. And so we went to the hospital and they didn't even get us started right away. So I'm glad we didn't rush. Like we just did our evening and had my mom come take care of our son and we had dinner like normal. Like we just took our time and did our own thing. I wasn't too worried about anything. So then we went in and my doctor was not the one managing our care because at that point, it was just the doctor on call because we knew we were going into an induction.
Okay.
I don't think they used any cervical ripeners on me.
You typically cannot with a VBAC. So typically we just see a balloon and Pitocin be available. The reason being we don't want that incision site to become thin and become a window or have any dissonance. So yeah, that makes sense. All right.
So I feel like we started Pitocin. I swear I have a timeline, but I can't find it. And so it's fine. But her pages, she has like 3 pages for her birth versus my son's, 3/4
inch thick birth. Yeah.
So I know that I think we started Pitocin that evening, really low
Okay.
and really slow.
Okay.
And then we placed a Foley bulb sometime in the middle of the night. And I will say that was not any more comfortable the
Okay.
second time around.
I'm a little
I
surprised
did
that you consented to it knowing what it was like the first time.
well, I mean, it was awful, but we weren't seeing really any cervical change, right?
Got it.
So I do remember that I went to have that placed and I had to stop the person placing it so that I could kind of try and drop in on my hypnosis,
Totally. Mm.
which I don't think that it was written on my birth plan or anywhere in my record that I had a history of birth trauma, but everybody did a really pretty good job. My cousin's wife was actually the charge nurse the the day I had Lila.
Nice.
So I think she was leaving as I got to the hospital. And so I don't know if she said something to anybody, but everybody was really pretty good that first night. And she kind of manipulated my services, right? So she kind of paired me up with who she thought I should have both days, which was nice, right? Because that's something that I don't think that I would have told them. I don't think I even had the words birth trauma when I had Lila,
Mm.
right?
And how many years after Augie did you have Lila?
So Augie would have been just about 4. So he was almost 4.
Okay, so she was born in 2019.
She was born in 2018. He was born at the beginning of 2015 and she was born at the end of 2018.
Okay. Okay.
So we did the Foley bulb. And I think the Pitocin, but we did the Pitocin super slow. And then I was moving around a lot, dancing, all kinds of stuff. A lot more
Totally.
movement with Lila.
Totally.
And then the next morning was okay. We probably called in my doula. I want to say at like 2 in the afternoon. I don't know.
Okay.
I turned down a cervical check. My cousin, she had put on this nurse who was just freshly back from maternity leave. And I turned down my cervical check. And she was like shocked. And she was like, well, I'm going to have to call your doctor.
You were like, okay, call her, tell
Okay,
her.
call my doctor.
Yeah.
But like, she's back fresh from maternity leave. And, you know, there is kind of an art to cervical checks. I don't know if you know this. You probably don't, but there is. And so her cervical checks were just freaking awful.
Painful.
So
Yeah.
not only do I not want, I want as few fingers inside of me as possible to
Totally.
decrease the risk of infection, but also you suck at this and I just don't want one.
Yeah.
So, so she called my doctor. So then my doctor came in. So I did let my doctor, but I mean, really, that's coercion. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to think or feel like my doctor coerced me, but really, when you look at it, that is, and that's
Yeah.
gross.
And that's typically how it happens, right? Is that it just feels like the next higher up comes in and is trying to convince you of something that you don't want. And that is coercion. I mean, the bottom line is you are supposed to be able to say no thanks, I don't want that. And they say, okay, great. We are happy to respect that. And if you haven't talked about risk and benefits, they should then say, do you have any questions about the risk and benefits before you go forth making your decision to decline this, right? And if you already have, then they should say, like, all right, great. As long as you feel comfortable the risk and the benefits, and we respect your no. I'm sorry for that. Yeah, that is yucky.
Yeah. So, I mean, it didn't change my feelings about my doctor. This person is still my
Sure.
doctor. I think part of it is that she was trying to also be supportive of the nurse,
Mhm.
and you have to maintain that relationship too.
Yep.
And so I did say, do you really need a cervical check? And she said, I think that it would really help us to see how things are progressing.
Okay.
And so then I consented. And this whole time I'm texting my doula, but we weren't like in enough pain to have her come in. And
Sure.
so she probably came in a couple hours later and she did kind of facilitate. So there was an episode of yours recently, and I want to say it was with Dr. Rachel Reed.
Oh, yeah.
talking a little bit about all of these maneuvers that people try and try this position and do this. And there was quite a bit of that in that labor, but that
Okay.
was also really, I was still in a point where I wanted somebody to save me. And I put a lot of weight in my team. And I
Mm,
believed that with this team, I was going to be golden. But also, I put a lot on them, which wasn't really fair either.
mm,
And not necessarily verbally, but in my head.
mhm,
Right. And so my doula did do a lot of like, try this, try that. We did a little bit of rebozo work.
mhm,
She did a lot of facilitating various movements, including like an abdominal lift and tuck, which is not terribly comfortable,
mhm.
but it worked. So when she got there, there was a tub room available because I had the goal to go
Amazing.
unmedicated. And so shortly after my doula came, the tub room was ready. And she said, I think we need to move now. And that was a good call on her part. She probably sees a lot more people in labor. I was like, no, we're probably fine. Just, no, it's probably time. So we moved to the tub room and did some lift and tug, some movement, all kinds of stuff. And then at some point, I got in the tub and almost immediately wanted out. I was like, I feel
Mm,
like pushy. I feel like I'm going to poop in the tub. And I did not want to do that.
yeah.
So I got in and basically back out. And my husband went to change out of his swim gear and back into dry clothes. And I'm sitting there like, I can't do this. I want an epidural. I am
Like,
done. I
clearly in
want to be
transition.
out. Like, yes, what I know now to have been transition.
Totally.
And so my doula just said, she locked eyes. We had the eye contact. And she said, Alexis, you said you didn't want an epidural. Which I will preface this before I say this part. I want to make sure that everybody knows that before this moment, before labor had gotten to this point, my doula said, if you ever get to the point where you are asking for an epidural, do you want me to help you remember why you chose not to? Or do you want me to help you go
Just
along with
honor
it?
that. Yep.
So I said, please help me remember, And so
Nice.
at this moment of transition, we locked eyes and she said, can you remind me why you don't want this epidural? And I don't even remember what I said, but I'm guessing it was something like, yeah, I don't want this to turn out like August birth.
Yeah.
And that was enough to get through. And I mean, I swear it's probably less than 30 minutes. It
Mm,
felt like the blink of an eye before I was
yeah.
pushing. So I started on hands and knees, and I did feel a little bit of discomfort. I said,
Okay.
my incision hurts.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so my doctor was really good. She was really calm.
Mhm.
She really kept her eye on that monitor. And I
Totally.
feel like she asked to put in the clip, which we know is more like a corkscrew.
Yeah.
I don't know if she ever put it in or not to
Yeah.
keep a good read because I don't remember Lila having like a scab on her head and I don't remember seeing it at all. But
Yeah. For
um
listeners, Alexis is talking about an internal electrode fetal monitoring, and they do actually kind of like screw it into your baby's head. Some providers will call it a clip or a sticker or something. It is a corkscrew and it does puncture your baby's head, but it is like a very accurate read on what your baby is doing. And so it might be a good choice for you if you're struggling to find your baby on the monitors and you're a little concerned, but you're not quite ready to make the decision for a C-section. It can be a good tool if you understand exactly what is happening. Obviously, anytime we puncture your baby, the risk of infection goes up, although I do think that the risk is still very low. Your biggest risk probably that you're going to notice is that your baby is going to have like a scab, and it might be a little bruise, and they might be a little bleedy from the top of their head where they did kind of screw that into their head. But again, it's a great way to get a direct line into your baby in terms of what's their heart rate really doing if we're struggling to find them with the external monitors or even the Doppler. Sometimes we struggle to find babies when they're really kind of low in that pelvis. Okay. All right. So you're not sure she actually even put that in.
no, I'm not because we switched positions. My doula said, is there
Okay.
a different position we could try pushing to see if that, changes that discomfort?
So where'd you go
Because of
next?
course, so then I just switched over to my back and
Okay.
It's actually how I had pictured birthing when I would visualize my birth, but I
Wow.
thought, everybody's always bashing it
Mhm.
to be on your back. And so I
Yeah.
was like, well, no, I want to try hands and knees. And
Yeah.
like,
Look, if you feel powerful on your back, you should do it. But I think a lot of people don't feel powerful there and they're made to be there. They're kind of forced to stay there. And I think that's where the problems arise. But no, if you feel good being there, definitely get on your back for sure.
which I was kind of elevated more than just like flat on my back, right?
Like the
So it
top
was
of you
almost, yeah,
in an incline.
at
Yeah.
an incline. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, which I think that, obviously, I think that I consented to that fetal monitor, internal fetal monitor, because when you have that kind of without any pain medication, picking up on that uterine scar pain, I think that, that made my doctor kind of nervous, but she really kept her cool. And we switched to that position of being on my back, which relieved the pressure that had been on the scar
I wonder if it was
immediately.
just too much. Yeah, just like being in hands and knees, the weight of the amniotic fluid, the weight of the placenta, the weight of your baby, the pressure of the contractions. I wonder if it was just too much on your incision site. That makes sense.
And or psychosomatic, right? Getting that
Totally.
close, which is, I mean, absolutely, in my opinion, within the realm of possibility. But
Definitely. Does that feel really aligned to you? Are you like, no, yeah, that feels very, very much like what might have happened?
I have no idea. I mean, I think it probably makes more sense that it was the pressure, but I was getting antsy because it's not like she pushed out super quick, right? I think it was
Sure.
probably an hour of pushing.
And what was going through your mind?
Well, I was kind of looking at the clock like, oh God,
Mm-hmm.
not again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like, she
Mm-hmm.
can't get stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, she came out, I don't know, after I had switched and her head came out. The cord was around her neck, or not around her neck. It was like around her shoulder. It
Oh
was like
yeah, like
on her
a
shoulder.
sash. Totally.
Kind of, yeah. And so I don't know that the doctor even said anything as that happened. She just undid it. And
Totally.
then it feels like she just like fell out after the head was out and the cord was moved. And I got to hold her right away. And it was insane because like I held her, I breastfed, I just it it was insane compared to the first round, right? I got up
Mm,
and showered. I took a nap. So like I held her for probably almost an hour, probably for the golden hour. I have no idea. I was so tired.
mm.
So then I held her, then my doctor did wait for the cord to stop and for everything to be white. She, showed it to me and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Yeah, let's just cut it." So then they took her over, did her measurements, and I fell right to sleep. I took a nice little nap, and then I was able to get up and shower, and it was insane. It was like, what? I'm just like walking and
Just a
moving
totally
and
different birth, even though they were both inductions, right? They
Mhm.
were both technically inductions. So when we first started this episode, I was like, okay, I know the takeaway here is going to be don't be induced, but you had a good induction the second time. So help us kind of put those together. What are your feelings around that?
I think it all depends on your level of understanding of what's happening, and
Mm,
the level of support that you have.
mm,
When you look at the first one, I didn't understand anything that was happening, which caused a lot of fear. Fear is going to block all those labor inducing hormones, it's going to slow things down and get in the way of everything.
yeah.
Whereas with the second one, not only was I going in with information and preparation, but I also had, I mean, you're talking about the doula, my husband, a really supportive doctor.
Hmm.
And then for my cousin to have handpicked the nurses that were around me, like, yeah,
Yeah, just a totally different team, totally different approach, different philosophies, and it resulted in a different story for you. Even though you didn't get to plan out your birth exactly, and there were some unexpected moments, like you had to pivot. Obviously, there were moments where you were like, all right, I got to pivot. This is not working, or like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, but here we are. It still turned out really positively. And I think this is such a great testament to, if last time didn't turn out well, don't do the same thing this time. Like, do something different. You can do everything different if you want, but definitely change providers. If it's an option, definitely change facilities. If it's an option, definitely hire that doula. Prepare your partner. Take that out of hospital childbirth education. Like, really do the work. And that's not to say you didn't do the work the first time. I know there are so many people out there who you do the work and you still get fucked by the system. And it is just like, I'm so sorry that happened. I really am. It is just something that unfortunately is part of the system right now. But we can still change next time, right? If all the stuff that you did last time, you thought you were doing the right things, let's do exactly what Alexis said. Let's go back and reevaluate, like, okay, where could things have been different? Where could maybe I have done different preparation, or what were those red flags that I didn't even know they were red flags and now I know, and so I'm going to change providers, right? um wow, your stories are very empowering. The first one is very unfortunate. It really is, but I don't know that anybody was necessarily at fault. Do you feel that same way?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say anybody's at fault. I
Yeah,
will say that people joke about with that doctor that you could just catch your own baby. Like have
yeah.
that doctor if you don't want any hands on anything. And I
Mm,
was probably just not informed enough to have that.
be
You
able to
know,
do
that would
that.
have been great
Yeah,
for somebody who wanted to just run their own show and catch their own baby and do
yeah.
their own thing.
Yeah. Look, it's really hard to have something happen to you like that and not place blame. Like, that's the human instinct, is to say, okay, what caused this? Who did this? Where's the blame? Because I need to be able to blame something or someone in order to move forward, right? That's super, super hard, because in birth, there's not always, sometimes there is, but there's not always somebody or something to blame.
Well, don't get me wrong, I never want to see her again.
Totally. Yeah. No,
But
I didn't think so, but I think that it's a really beautiful display of the healing that you've done, where you don't blame her and you don't harbor any like really hard feelings towards her, because, you know, while she might have not been the best provider for you, like, matched for you, doesn't mean she's a bad provider. And it doesn't sound like she did anything out of like malintent or just like disagreeing with you, or, all the things that you and I hear when we talk to people who have traumatic stories. There are providers out there who do, sometimes they do things just really ugly for no reason, like they have an ulterior motive, or they do have their own agenda regardless of what their patient wants. And it doesn't seem like you had that, even though she wasn't a great match for you.
no, and she's got her strengths, right? And I could see those
Totally.
strengths. And that is why it stayed with her, right? Everybody has different strengths.
Yeah.
And if you
Mm,
don't know what you want, you're just along for the ride, right? If you don't plan your birth, it will be just whatever the the medical industrial system does, right?
yeah. Yeah, it's just a conveyor belt of,
Hmm.
and you just hope that little claw that reaches down and picks up people off that conveyor belt doesn't reach down and picks up you and send you off to a C-section. You hope you get to scurry by and come out with a vaginal delivery. And I don't want that for people. I want you to be able to say, I'm not getting on that conveyor belt, and we're going to do my birth this way. And I feel very informed of the risk and the benefits, and I know my options. And as things pivot in my labor, I feel confident and informed to make those decisions, and I'm confident in having these discussions with my provider too. Okay, you help people heal from C-sections. You help people kind of go through these emotions and the things that are normal but may not feel normal, and the things that come up after having a C-section. Tell us a little bit about what you do, and who would be appropriate to work with you.
Yeah. So I do like birth story debriefs for parents who are under a year
Mm,
postpartum. And I have a free course for people anytime postpartum. And that is a free course on just healing from a difficult birth, whether you had a cesarean or things just didn't go as you planned. There are a lot of tools in there that can help get you on the right path. There's a whole workbook. People use it in conjunction with coaching with me. They use it in conjunction with their therapists. I have had therapists ask me for this resource.
mm.
It's pretty thorough. It's a great tool and it is literally what I set out to do and I did it. So
Nice.
please use it. It's a great resource.
Yeah, cool. We'll link that in the show notes and then we'll link where you can find Alexis as well so that you can work with her if you want to. Alexis, truly, thank you so much for being here with us today. This has been fabulous. And again, I just want to say how inspirational you are because I can feel the amount of healing that you have done. I can feel that you have moved through the traumas and the experiences that you've had, and you've truly come out stronger on the other side. You're different. I can hear it in your voice. I can like just picture the old Alexis having Augie, and now I know you as the you are today. And it is actually very inspirational. So please don't ever lose your light and don't ever stop talking about the things that you're talking about because I know that there's a lot of people who are healing because you have healed yourself and you're now sharing that with the world. So thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, HeHe. I just want everybody to remember that it doesn't have to be like this. If you are just in the crap of the postpartum, healing is possible.
Yeah, totally. All right, you guys. I know this is an extra long episode, but I think now that we've made it to the end, you know why it was so necessary, and also you can feel how worth it was to hang on until this point with us. Alexis, again, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. You guys, until next time, check out our Instagram at Tranquility by HeHe or the.birth.lounge. And we just launched our new Birth Lounge website, so you can check that out at thebirthlounge.com and go play around over there. We have a whole new section of resources for you to take control of your birth and have a positive birth story. Avoid that C-section that you don't want. Have your baby on your own time and learn how to confidently communicate with your provider so that you can have an informed birth and you can feel excited about having your baby. All right, you guys, until next time, bye. Thanks for joining us. I'll see you next time on the Birth Lounge podcast. Until then, head over to Instagram and find us at Tranquility by HeHe and give us a follow. You can also check us out at thebirthlounge.com.